Good morning and welcome to Daybreak Live. It's a brand new day and we are glad to have you with us as we break down the stories shaping the world, politics, conversations across the country. I'm Anuluakpo Ido.
And I'm Oluwayemi Adelakun. This morning, the economy is front and center. Former Labour Party presidential candidate Peter Obi is calling on the federal government to suspend the implementation of the new tax law, arguing that it timing could place even more pressure on Nigerians already dealing with rising living costs.
It's the statement that's getting people talking, and we unpack the issues, reactions and implications in our Daybreak gist shortly, after which we'll bring you weather reports from major cities across the country to help you know what to expect from Mother Nature today.
Definitely, we'll also bring you the latest news update and then take a closer look at how today's stories have been framed in the papers. After that, we'll bring you a roundup of the day's major stories before diving into our newspaper headlines analysis.
Joining us for that segment is Temitope Ishola, a public affairs analyst who will help us make sense of how today's newspapers are framing up the key national issues as well are going to be on the table of discourse.
Okay, and later on the program is a big story. We'll be discussing candidate selection and electoral success, why the opposition's choice of candidate could be the difference between winning and losing at the polls, and why choosing the right flag bearer can make or break them.
Absolutely. We examine how internal party decisions shape public trust, voter enthusiasm, and overall electoral outcomes, often long before campaigns begin.
And our guest for that conversation is Ignatius Ofino, a researcher and public affairs analyst, who will share insight on strategy, voter perception, and political outcomes.
So before we wrap up, we head for the online trend segment where we check the trend watch spotlighting the issues Nigerians are reacting to and debating right now.
Definitely. It's all coming up on Daybreak Live on Dominion Television. Let's get started this morning. Good morning
Absolutely.
to you.
Good morning to you, Yemi, this morning.
Good morning, Anne. Well
Yeah,
done.
I mean, it's always, it's taking time for you to break every morning. I don't know if you have
Yeah.
to depend, if you don't have a wristwatch that is working, if you don't have a phone that is
And if you don't set your alarm.
you know, all of those things, you
Honestly.
might be caught in that web.
Exactly. And I think it started from the 1st of January,
January.
this year. I mean, that's the new dimension.
Absolutely.
Exactly.
So let's get into the conversation.
Definitely. So Peter Obi said something. That's
Yeah.
the former presidential candidate of Labour Party, Peter Obi, said the tax law should be suspended. And then, he's been able to come up with certain reasons why he thinks, it should be suspended. Let me start from this one. He's trying to say that, a report by KPMG Nigeria, which flagged potential issues including the taxation of shares, dividend treatment, non-resident obligations, and foreign exchange deductions. According to him, proper consultation, was not done before, coming up with this, tax laws and all of those. And then he also likened this tax reform to social contract, and I think according to the likes of Thomas Hobbes, in his book Leviathan, written in 1651, he was trying to explain that social contract means that the people, the society decides to have a ruler, a very powerful ruler, and of course they surrender willingly their powers to that ruler, and in exchange for that the ruler is supposed to ensure their safety, ensure law and order, and of course security, and quite a number of things. So in a situation whereby that ruler is unable to provide all of those things, they can take it back from that ruler. So it's a lot of things to discuss, because I mean, even the chairman of the presidential fiscal reforms has been going from one media house to another, trying to explain the complexities of this tax reform, because a lot of people do not understand. Now, this is the issue. He also brought to the fore this argument to say that even KPMG cannot understand the tax reform, and of course, I mean, the intellectuals of this country, they move from one closed door meeting to the other, trying to break down, I mean, all the complexities of this tax reform. So how sure is the government that, I mean, the commoners on the street will understand this tax reform? So these are the arguments that Peter Obi is bringing to the fore, to say that it should be looked into properly before saying we should move on. If at all, the tax reform should go through years of research, and of course try to speak to the business owners, the marketers, and of course the salary earners, to ensure that they are well catered for before moving on to actually implementing the tax reform.
I guess it's very important that we state that tax someday somehow will still become a reality in the country, Nigeria. Someday somehow, even if it's not this administration, we're eventually going to get to that point where people have to pay tax. Why? It is very important for every nation, for every economy to grow. So while that is ascertained, some of the claims of Peter Obi are also valid in the sense that it wasn't just his claims. And there was a lot of, about 31 issues were discovered in that particular policy. But what does it tell us? It tells us that, because according to him, to Taiwo Udele, he clarified that some of those points are valid and they are going to work on it. So one of the things we must also acknowledge is this is a work in progress. It is not just a one-time thing. It is a thing where we have to keep doing, they have to keep working on. But I think one of the claims that I'm going to allude to very seriously of Peter Obi is that before this kind of things should happen, before you even put this into implementation, there has to be one consultation, like you mentioned, the people and some concerned entities, maybe the Nigeria Labour Congress, the Trade Union Congress, every other person that will be affected or that is representing the voice of the people should come together. This is what we are proposing. How can we better arrange for this? This is why I'm saying this. Oftentimes we've seen policies that there's something called technology transfer. It's when you take something that's working somewhere and just bring it back to another place so as to ensure that it works there too. But one of the underlying things we are forgetting is that for everything to work, for every house to be built, there needs to be a foundation. There are foundational systems that need to be in place before you start building some of these things. If you take hook, line, and sinker, a policy that is working, for example, in Canada, and bring it to Nigeria, it will fail the test of time. Why? The peculiarity of the states is different from that of Canada, the Nigerian state, So if you have to consider some of the peculiarities, the intricacies, then you'll be able to make better policies. Not just drive policies and bring it home. Drive policies, check what is obtainable in the house, and then, okay, say, how can we make this better? How can we do this to tailor it to the needs of the people, the peculiar needs of the people we are serving? Because at the end of the day, it's not really about the policy you make, it's about the people, how it reflects on them. So when Peter Obi gave out, they reeled out some of the concerns, quite a number of them. 31 is too much for something this big, because we understand. He also mentioned that this might, add to the burdens that Nigerians are going to face. That is also valid, because if you understand, maybe for a lot of persons, it was also one of the things they mentioned also was the fact that it affects foreign exchange as well. It affects people that are not Nigerians as well, because that might have a bad outlook on foreign investors coming to Nigeria to do business. Because if they see, well, if this tax is going to affect me drastically, then there's no we should, because she mentioned also, because she had the advantage of access to see there are a lot of companies making over $10 million, 10 million, maybe 10 million naira, I can't remember the figure, but she said something like that. There were a lot of them that have not paid tax in the last 10 years in Nigeria, and they evade tax not by evading it rightfully but unlawfully. So there's a need to get that. But while we also address that, we must also address the issue that it must not reflect badly, so poorly on the Nigerian people, because at the end of the day, the laws are made for them, not them for the law. You understand? So I'm trying to say that there are a lot of issues that are not well tackled right at the root. But I think going forward, we should, and I think one of the things I'm going to allude to quickly is that I'm not sure this should have been by 2026 January we're starting. I'm seeing how about we start by saying, okay, so there's a new tax policy, there's a part of it that is going to fly, because there are other parts we are still working on. So this is the case. We can now cut it to say, okay, so this affects these people, maybe 800,000 income earners and all of that, they pay you, and this is why we are doing this yet. But we cannot put some of these things in place because we are still working on how to. I feel, in my opinion, I feel what they did was just get a development, a policy, and bring it on the people without considering the peculiarity of the Nigerian state, how it's going to reflect on the people. And I think that's my opinion.
Okay, I think you're very spot on. And let me take you from the angle. Benjamin Franklin said something that, there are two things that you cannot avoid in this life: death and, of course, paying of tax. But then, I mean, in the Western world, you cannot avoid it. So we can also avoid it in Africa, or let me say Nigeria now. So a lot of Nigerians have been paying tax before now, though indirectly. And of course, speaking of peculiarities, it is a problem to see that it's looking like this old tax reform was a bit rushed, and then, proper consultations, were not done before, saying that, okay, we are starting January 1st and this and that. And another problem is the fact that, according to Taiwo Oyedele now, he said several times that, okay, the poor, we pay less, and the rich, we pay more. Okay, how sure are we that that will stand? Because, I mean, the poor that you're talking about, we have common, amongst the poor, we have commoners, we have, learned people. A lot of them do not understand, how this tax reform will work. So it's easy for them to protest online to say we don't want to pay tax, even speak about the oil subsidy now. When it was removed at the time, what the government said was, okay, the money is going to be transferred to other things to ensure that, people are comfortable. And until now, okay, the price is going down, little by little, but then it's still high for a lot of persons because, certain prices have not gone back to what it used to be. So because of trust, that's why I said, going back to the, principle of social contract now, okay, authorities, or let me say laws are only legitimate, when it serves the people. So when it's not serving the people, it's a problem. And then the issue of trust too. Speaking of, subsidy, Nigeria, a lot of Nigerians do not trust this current administration because of, what transpired, around the old subsidy. It's been removed, it's not been removed. At the time, there were even rumors that it was not removed at all. So because of that, and that's why a lot of Nigerians are not so comfortable with this whole, tax reform. The poor will pay less, the rich will pay more. So I think the government must do a lot in ensuring that the people can trust them to a certain extent before you're not trying to say that we should come and pay this tax. At the end of the day, tax is supposed to help build our society. I mean, this is what happens in the Western world. They pay tax, and of course, they can see the dividends of the tax that they are paying. So how sure are we that Nigerians will begin to see the dividends of this tax when they begin to pay? So a lot of people are afraid about this whole thing. And of course, I thought Oyedele mentioned something. I mentioned that he's been going from one media house to the other. He said the people that are troubling us the most are those who do not even have close to 5 million in their account. And of course, I had to pause a little bit to understand what he's trying to say, that even the rich are not complaining so much. And he said it appears that the rich, are trying to instigate the poor, to protest against this tax reform. It will always happen, because, I mean, they're afraid to say, okay, this little that I have and I'm trying to save, I still want to be paying tax on it. And I'm not sure that it's going to reflect because, I mean, prices are high, things are going on in the country. It's a lot to unpack. Is it spot on? Does he have points to say that it should be suspended? Yes, maybe it might be put on hold for a while because anything you rush, at the end of the day, you discover that, you have to wait more. And then you will learn, but you will learn the hard way. So it's not good to rush certain things. But I want to believe that, the government and, of course, the president, they have intellectuals on this matter trying to make it work. Taiwo Oyedele also said that, KPMG do not understand the tax law. These people, this firm, they are in charge of audit. They're in charge of, things that has to do with finance. So if you say they don't understand the tax reforms, so what about the commoners on the road? How do you expect them to understand if people who have degrees cannot understand the tax reform?
Absolutely.
How do you expect people to understand?
Because now, if he makes, well, he's making the claims. Right? What about the National Assembly? There was a time they said the ones that was passed to them was not the same as the one that is being circulated. And a lot of that came about. So I think one of the things I want to say is that an aspect they did not do. Okay, so let me tell you a quick story. I went to buy something in the place I used to go. And when I got there, the woman asked me to put the narration. And I asked her what should be the narration. And she told me something very funny. And it was very funny to me. Because an average person there does not understand what this tax policy is. So they are in limbo as to what to do. So sometimes they tell you, you want to do POS. Don't write POS, write something. I mean, so there's a lot of question tags everywhere. Miscommunications, misconceptions, and all of this that needs to be, addressed by this particular, what's the National Orientation Agency doing about this? I mean, we need to see, we've seen where they put up 747, we've seen where they do a lot of public orientation and all of this, which is okay, but how about this too? This is just as important, especially because you are rushing it. A lot of persons are getting so much information and less to understand. It's so difficult for them to manage the information. There's miscommunication on the part of Taiwo Idile and every other person in that sect. There's a need for them to explain in detail. So people should know, okay, this is the taxable income. I mean, they've released so many reports. I mean, some of this, if you check for an average person who has gone to school, it might still be difficult for you to understand the intricacies. You know, even if you read between the lines, it might be difficult to interpret some of those writings. Let us have a conversation for the populace, for the people, to understand that this tax reform is that. Okay, so one of the ways we can do this, and I'm professing this as a solution, is to say what the tax policy is not. You know, it's okay when you want to know something, what is a COP? It's also good if you want to know from the angle that what is a COP not, or what is not likely to be a COP. So it creates a better understanding of the picture is quite clearer. If you say these are the misconceptions, these are the myths, these are the things, okay, so let's debunk this. This will not happen in this tax reform. How about that? How about proper communication? How about having town hall meetings? How about setting up people that will go? Because I have issues with, I don't know how to go about these things to fully express what I'm trying to say. There are people who are supposed to man certain things in this kind of policy for it to work well. There are institutions who are supposed to be saddled with that responsibility to not just tell people, but to help people go about how to work this tax out for maybe for organizations and all of this thing. But now you get to see that individuals are coming up in corporate bodies and agents will come up and say they want to help organizations, but in that way too, some of them might need to maybe, I don't know, extort the people because they don't have a choice. There are not so much options. How many finance experts can you meet now for your company, for your little company that you're just starting up, that I need a tax understanding of all of these things? Let me get you to engage me. So how, just not just engage, but to help me go about paying the tax directly and rightly. They said a lot of things about eventually after the year there's going to be an account of, okay, how you spend some of the things but who's going to be in charge of that? How many persons can be interfacing with over 200 million people to explain this was this? So they're saying, okay, we are going to see through your accounts which one is taxable. I mean, which one is the income, which one is the payee, which one is the taxable income, which one is not. All of these things are still, people are still not so, it's abstruse, yeah? It's not very clear, it's not vivid, it's not lucid as they see. They probably see it lucidly, but we cannot yet see it. So we need to also get on the same page that Taiwo Idile is. He knows this is the best for Nigeria, we agree. How can it be understandable? How can it be understood, if so to say? How can it be understood by an average commoner, a person in the country who needs this information? And I think that's one of the things we need to put on the table.
Definitely, and I think to conclude, I want to believe that sensitization should be done periodically, not just at once, so that when people need answers to questions, they can always visit appropriate bodies to ask questions, and of course they get answers as to what they need to do when it comes to these tax reforms. But it doesn't really have to be stopped totally, but then proper things should be done before we kick off these tax reforms. And of course that's the fine place to leave that discussion. We want to move on to weather reports this morning.